there was a ban put out last week. I did not comment on it at the time. You saw it? There's a book. I saw it. It was a set. It was Peshuto Shel Mikra. It was basically a perush on the Torah. They start with first explaining Rashi and then just the psukim, focusing on just pshat without bringing Midrashim. And for some reason, I guess the type of people who are never happy with anything and always have to cause people problems, basically said this is the worst thing in the world. It doesn't go with Rashi. Everything, Rashi is the Masorah, and Rashi brings a Midrashim, that's pshat. It was so inane what they were writing. It's like, have these people ever read any Rishonim? Are they familiar with the Rambam and the Rashbam, or with the Ibn Ezra and the Abarbanel and everybody else? Yeah, the Ramban. Ramban sometimes dismisses this, and even Rashi himself says that perhaps he didn't have to use all these midrashim. It was Rashbam who doesn't use midrashim, right? Rashbam was his oldest grandson. Rashbam was the one who wrote. We have testimony from the Rashbam that Rashi said that Rashi's perush on the Torah is incomplete, and if he could go back, he would do it better. Why? By the way, why didn't Rashi finish his perush on the Torah? Well, he barely finished his perush on Tanakh. We don't have Rashi in all Tanakh. And he didn't even finish his perush on Shas. So why do you expect Rashi to have put out his final edition of his perush on the Torah? They told me the Kuntris. Why does Tosfos call it the Kuntris? Because Rashi put it out. He serialized his perush on the Talmud. Remember, where the ones who call it the Kuntris are his grandchildren and great grandchildren. So Rabbeinu Tam didn't have that much connection to Rashi, like we discussed. Either way, I thought it was just incomprehensible that whoever was writing this basically shows. Here, how does Midrash work? Like we emphasize, when a Midrash says something, it tells you more about what the sage who said the Midrash was thinking and what's behind, what his hashkafa is, his ideology, than it does about the facts in the Torah. For example, Bilam. We have many Midrashim that contradict themselves. Bilam could not have been an advisor to Pharaoh before the enslavement of the Israelites, and also killed by Pinchas at the age of 35, both of which are midrashim that show up in Parak Chelek. Bilam was killed at the age of 35, which means he was born 4 years at the age of 35. The Gemara says it very clearly. It says, "Anshe damim lo yechetzu yemehem." Men who were steeped in blood, caused bloodshed, shall not even live half their days. Half a man lives for 7 years. So they say Bilam died at the age of 35. Then there's a classic Midrash says that Bilam, Yisro, and Eov were Pharaoh's advisors before the enslavement. Obviously, these two midrashim are not resolvable. Like many midrashim are not resolvable with each other because they contradict each other. Instead, what the Midrash is teaching us is saying about the one who said the Midrash. So too, when you come out with a band like this, you can read the sources in English and in Hebrew. It shows not that the creators of this wonderful Chumash, get yourself a copy, by the way. This wonderful Peshuto Shel Mikra, it should still be in stores unless the store is now intimidated to take it out. It tells you more about the Kanayim, I just say the bad guys who put out these bands, than it does about the substance of what they have to say or the people they are attacking. I can't understand it. I can't understand why they would put out something like this, and it's a shame. And I hope no one's listening to them. But apparently, this has taken on a life of its own. This whole thing in Lakewood, and it basically shows you what they think about studying Torah. It is certainly not sophisticated. It's very third grade. It's like, how can you not do that? Well, I guess these people never learned what I keep trying to emphasize to everybody. When you study Torah, know what's a Midrash, know what the Torah says, know what's a Perush, know all these different things. Know what's a positive tradition, by the way. The sages sometimes, not in Midrash, they just say, we have a positive tradition that this is it, and that's a fact. They do that sometimes. Why? To distinguish that between Midrashim, which are not necessarily the historical facts. For example, what's the best one in Buffa Basra? What do they say? They throw in information. What was King David's mother's name? What was Abraham's mother's name? Why would they have to fill it in? Because all the other patriarchs, we all know their mothers, right? And all the Davidic kings, their mothers are mentioned explicitly, except for who? King David himself. For all the Davidic kings mentioned in the Book of Kings, their mother's always mentioned, except for the first one. What was Yishai's wife's name? So they put it there. Slelfuni, I think, no, or it says, was that the name of Shimshon's mother?
Yeah,
Shimshon's mother. And then it has, Amathli was,
right, that's the
Bath Carnival was Abraham's mother.
And also the name of Haman's mother.
Yes, they have the same mother's name. So you remember there's a mnemonic to remember it. The point is to show that Chazal, just because something's not in Tanakh, it doesn't mean we don't have tradition of what happened. Fine. And the last thing is, on the other hand, I'm very confused by Bible criticism, biblical criticism. There are those who are trying to kosher it. I don't think it leads to anything. Yes, I understand there's some really smart, committed Jews, friends of mine, who believe in the academic study of the Bible, which basically takes apart these things. But I don't think it leads to anything good. Rabbi Salvation says he doesn't really care. He's not threatened by Bible criticism. Barbanel and Ibn Ezra type stuff is quite mild. I'm talking about the type of people who say that the Bible, what we believe is the Torah, is basically a compilation that was put together in the early Second Temple times.
All the linguistic information is quite useful.
Okay, yes, there is a lot. Yeah, they ask good kashas, but there's also good. There's also good answers. I never liked the Torah.com. I'm not going to say, oh, these people are terrible. I don't like the people who are putting out bans because they're making personal attacks on people, ruining people's lives. And the Torah.com, they don't seem to have any personal axe to grind, so they don't seem to be bad people. But I still don't like anything they're writing, and I wish someone would rebut them. I think the best rebuttal to them was put out by Professor Chazoni, Yoram Chazoni, who himself is from, and you can find what he wrote. He put it on Gil Student's website a few years ago, what he felt about it. It's basically an echo chamber, and there's too much nonsense for actual sinners. And they also basically use it as an allowance. They're going to say, and therefore, it shows that a lot of people read this and they don't have any loyalty to the commandments. So I find it so funny, by the way, because I could point to you people who claim to be 100% Jewish. Yet what do? They take apart the Torah. The Torah is not what it says. And by the way, I never understood that because they say it's put together from all these different sources. Shkoyach. But there was someone who put it together eventually, correct? I've put together books before. I know maybe you could take it apart and you could find that when I put this book out, there's something that looks like I wrote it back in 2016. There's another part that I wrote in 2019, and they have different influences. You could do that, but tell me what the final product is. Just because you say like this part of the Torah was written then and this part of the Torah was written then, two different authors was put together. What was the person who eventually pasted it all together? What was he trying to get across? And you keep missing that. Fine, but they take it apart. It's not what it says, and then they are apologetic, right? They say, this commandment we don't really have to follow because back then there were this and that. This positive commandment is outdated. Now we're going to reinterpret it. We don't have to do it anymore. And this prohibition also was back then they had taboos and all those things, and now we don't have to keep these prohibitions. So once again, keep that very close to your heart. That's what they do. They take apart the Torah. Torah isn't what they say it is. It wasn't written by who we say it was. It's not what it purports to be. It might not even be historical truth. And then these very same people, you can find them. I don't have to name names and point fingers, but these very same people, what do they then do? The New York Times, that's emes labito. The New York Times is exactly what they say it is. It's the sources are the people who say it is. It's every article is written by the person whose name appears on the byline. That's 100% true. Everything they say can be relied upon as historical fact. It's going to become an historical record, and they never lie to you. The New York Times is 100% truth, and its prescriptions for how you should live your life should be listened to a T, right? There are people who do that. New York Times, that they live that. They don't realize that because they live in America, and all they do is not necessarily New York Times, but all the other things. I don't know what's like in England, but they probably do that. There are some people who their entire life is they read so much of these things, they don't even realize how influenced they are to it. The New York Times is 100%, and everything it says to do, they do, and everything that's wrong to the New York Times is usher to them. Right? New York Times says usher, it's usher. New York Times says do this, they'll do it, and it's 100% emes. But the Torah itself, they don't give that same covet. Very strange, right? Very strange. They don't take it the Torah at its face value. It wasn't written by who it is, and what the Torah says, But they're 100%, loyal to Jews. They like the word Orthodox. Everybody loves the word Orthodox. So Orthodox is slowly losing its meaning also. And there you go.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.